Welcome to Faith Nation. I'm John Jessup.
And I'm Jenna Browder. Well, the future of 700,000 young immigrants will be determined by the Supreme Court.
CBN News White House correspondent Ben Kennedy reports on how the justices recently heard from both sides as President Trump pushes to end the Obama-era immigration program known as DACA.
These young immigrants looked here to the Supreme Court for help in an effort to stay in the country. Dreamers took their fight to the steps of the Supreme Court.
Our home is here.
Her story is one the High Court might consider when deciding on President Trump's bid to end the Deferred Action for Childhood Arrival program, or DACA. It protects young immigrants, known as Dreamers, brought to the U.S. illegally as children. Under DACA, they can stay and work in the U.S. with a renewable 2-year permit.
DACA has been an opportunity for me to pay it forward by becoming a teacher and helping my students understand the power of their own stories.
In 2017, the White House announced it would end those protections, although lower federal courts kept the program going.
We know, sabemos, that DACA is legal and constitutional because of the multiple courts that have already rejected the Trump administration's attempt to rip DACA away from hundreds of thousands of people.
President Trump tweeted, "Many of the people in DACA, no longer very young, are far from angels. Some are very tough, hardened criminals." President Obama said he has no legal right to sign order, but would anyway. If Supreme Court remedies with overturn, a deal will be made with Dems for them to stay.
When we think about our dreamers, we think about folks who are as American as any of us, who fundamentally have contributed significantly to not only our economy, but to our American way of life. And the Congressional Hispanic Caucus for years has fought to get Congress to recognize the fact that these folks are Americans.
Say it loud, say it clear.
But it's the Supreme Court that will decide if Trump's effort to wind down DACA complies with federal law. Now, the ruling is expected by next June when the court releases this term's decision, and it could be a close call, with a deciding vote possibly coming from Chief Justice John Roberts. Ben Kennedy, CBN News, the Supreme Court.
And we recently spoke with Wadi Gatan of the Libre Institute about what's at stake for Dreamers as the Supreme Court decides the fate of DACA.
What's at stake is the dreamers and their future, right? We understand that dreamers are contributors to our economy. They're contributors to our society as a whole. They're a big part of our schools. They're a big part of our churches. I mean, they're embedded in what is American society. And when we talk about their future, we're also talking about the future of people who depend on them, right? So a lot of employers depend on the talent and skills that dreamers have. Dreamers have gone through our school system. There's an investment in them. There's knowledge and talent that they have and that is contributing. So the moment that they are in jeopardy for deportation, it's not just jeopardy for their futures, but for their families and, again, our community as a whole.
Obviously, cameras are not allowed in the courtroom, but was there anything you heard coming out of oral arguments today that really struck you?
Yeah, well, a lot of the reports are showing that there's an inclination from the court to rule in favor of the administration. Now, those reports obviously can change if the Supreme Court comes out and gives a different ruling. But at the end of the day, no matter what the Supreme Court decides, we believe that the eyes should really turn to Congress. Congress and the White House have the power to legislate. They do not need to wait for a decision. They can work now on a bill that is permanent for dreamers and provides them a legal path to citizenship.
Gotti, tell us about the role that the Libra initiative is playing with Dreamers.
Yeah, so we're a grassroots organization, so we really believe in taking the voice of the community to Congress, taking the voice of the community to Washington. So we partner with Dreamers across the country. We want to make sure that their stories of how they're contributing to the community and how they're playing an essential role in American society is heard here in Congress. When people hear their stories, they're more inclined to support and to be helpful for what is this cause.
Is there a viable bipartisan solution here?
Yes, we think so. So really, when it comes to it, we have to understand that there are Democrats control the House and Senate Republicans have control, but then there's also a Republican in the presidency. So we believe a bipartisan path forward would be one that pairs a permanent solution for dreamers and at the same time provides enhancement for border security. There is wide support across our nation for both of these issues. If we pair them together, not only is it a win for Democrats and Republicans, but it's a win for our country and for dreamers and for the security of our southern border.
So you hit on this a little bit about the role of both the White House and Congress, but do you think that that there is enough consensus right now for both the White House and Congress to own up to the responsibility to come up with a permanent solution for dreamers?
It's no secret that right now the topic of immigration is one that tends to be dominated by divisiveness. If you see the headlines or if you go on social media, it's a contentious topic. But at the end of the day, when you look at polls and when you look at data, there is wide support in favor of dreamers. We understand that they came here as children. They know no other home. And they pledge allegiance to our flag, and their contributions are of great benefit to our nation and to their families. So we think if Congress can take this first step, we understand that there's a lot when it comes to immigration reform. There's a lot of parts that need to be fixed because they are broken. But if they can take a first step and focus on border security and dreamers, we can get the ball rolling. We can get a solution that will hopefully lead to updating our legal immigration system and addressing the rest of the undocumented population.
Just a few seconds left here, but we're not going to get a ruling until June. Wadi, how do you see this playing out?
Well, the reality is, come June, we're in 2020. We're in the middle of the 2020 elections. Parties tend to be divisive. We think there's an opportunity between now and the end of the year for Congress to really come together. This is an opportunity for them to put together bipartisanship and to unite around something that we believe is common sense.
Right. Wadi Gatan with the Libre Initiative. Thank you so much. Great to have you.
Real pleasure.
Dan. Well, the Supreme Court has agreed to hear an abortion case regarding a Louisiana law that could leave the state with one doctor in a single clinic to provide abortions. The Louisiana law, signed in 2014, requires every physician who performs or induces an abortion have active admitting privileges at a hospital no more than 30 miles from the location at which the abortion is performed or induced. Louisiana currently has 3 licensed abortion clinics. It will be the first case about abortion for the court's new majority of justices appointed by Republican presidents, including President Trump's 2 appointees, Justices Neil Gorsuch and Brett Kavanaugh. This court will hear the case in March. A ruling is expected early next summer.
The Supreme Court heard 3 major cases in October that center on the question of identity. And as Paul Strand explains, they could have a big impact on a vast portion of the American population.
At the core of these cases is, what does the word sex mean when it comes to law? In 1964, when it first became illegal to discriminate on the basis of sex, it meant male or female. Now, at least one side in these cases is arguing it's a bit more complicated.
The cases involve a transgender and 2 homosexuals fired from their jobs.
Millions and millions of people that go to work every day fearful for being fired for who they are, how they identify, and who they love.
Anthony Stevens, now calling himself Amy Stevens, was fired from Tom Ross Funeral Homes for saying he planned to start wearing dresses instead of the suits required of male employees.
What happened to me was wrong, and hopefully we can fix that and correct it from this point on.
Funeral homes owner Tom Ross worries his business will be wiped out if the court rules against him.
Now we face severe penalties because the ACLU is trying to change the law out from under us.
Homosexuals and transgenders in these cases are arguing they need to be treated equally in the eyes of the law. But the other side is arguing, beware the law of unintended consequences. Especially worried are women, who are saying they're going to lose some rights while these other folks are gaining them.
Penny Nance of Concerned Women for America points out women in prisons and women's shelters are scared they'll be forced into intimate quarters with transgender men.
Women in domestic shelters are filing suit over the fact that suddenly these women who have been so hurt are now having to share showers and common space with men. And so this is a serious issue.
Birch represented Harris Funeral Homes against the transgender fired from there. He said the justices seemed aware of the damage changing the definition of sex could have on American life.
The justices across the bench were troubled by the fact that the ACLU's argument would eliminate all sex-specific policies in the workplace, whether they be sex-specific showers, dress codes, restrooms, sports teams. Every single one of those things would have to go.
So, if the homosexual and transgender side thought they'd have an easy time with this court, apparently not, from the toughness of the questions the justices were asking of that side. Paul Strand, CBN News, reporting from the Supreme Court.
And we will be right back with more Faith Nation after the break.
Introducing the CBN Bible from CBN.com. Now, an easier way to study the Bible and grow in your faith. Highlight your favorite verse. Read separate versions at a glance. Click and read a commentary. Or cross-reference your favorite verse using the Strong's Concordance. All the right tools to study the Bible, all in one place. The CBN Bible, available at cbn.com/Bible or the iTunes App Store.
This is CBN Newswatch.
Thanks for joining us.
Watch breaking news, exclusive stories and programs, credible news reporting.
We show you what's happening in the world and how you can pray about it.
This is CBN Newswatch, because truth matters. Weekdays at 5 on the CBN News Channel.
Yes, right on time.
From Superbook.
Pepper's Pizza Palace is donating pizza for everyone today. Wait. I have big plans today.
Trust in God even when times are tough. He has a plan for your life.
Hey, we're gonna be late for the grand opening.
My parents want me to help with this outreach thing, feeding the community. What am I supposed to do here? Superbook!
Join the Superbook Club and get Superbook The Birth of Moses, plus 2 copies to share with others, all for your gift of only $25.
Pharaoh ordered all newborn Hebrew boys thrown into the Nile River, and I have a 3-month-old brother.
The Birth of Moses. Yours for a gift of only $25.
What will you do the next time the soldiers come? I do not know, but I trust God has a plan for all of us.
Superbook Club members, free streaming for seasons 1, 2, and 3 is now available.
Well, welcome back. CBN News senior Washington correspondent Paul Strand has covered the Supreme Court for more than 3 decades. He's now with us for more. Paul, thank you so much for that package. I want to ask you, what do you see as the most important case likely to come out of the court this term?
Well, I would think it's that one I was just talking about there involving the 2 homosexuals and the transgender. They were actually 3 separate cases, but the Supreme Court rolled them all into one. And there is this crucial case. You know, it's illegal right now to discriminate on the basis of sex. And these folks are saying throw in sexual orientation, throw in gender rights or gender identity, and make those the same thing. You can't discriminate on the basis of those. And if the court came and said, yes, you cannot do that, it's going to have implications way beyond just these people being employed, because then you have to wipe out the sex differences all over society. That means like on sports teams, restrooms, locker rooms, all that kind of thing. And all the religious groups that stand with this, you know, the biblical, the traditional sort of teachings on these things, and maybe they hire folks like this or are not hiring folks like this because of their sexual orientation or their gender identity. They could be in a whole lot of trouble. We could see the Jack Phillips, the baker guy in Colorado, we could see his case multiplied by tens of thousands, possibly.
Any way to read the tea leaves from oral arguments to see where the court might land?
The court really gave the pro-homosexual and pro-transgender side, they gave them a lot of tough questions, because they realized if we rule for these folks, then that has implications throughout society. Right. And especially worried about this are women, because many of the ways that we divide men and women, it was to protect women. And the reason we have this thing that you can't discriminate against women at work or against, you know, sex on the job was mostly to protect women. They were discriminated against in decades past. And they're just worried what's going to happen, because in many cases where they were separated to help them, to protect them, these protections will just be gone. So the implications are vast.
Well, on the issue of abortion, a major abortion case has not come up in years, Paul. What's the significance of this Louisiana case?
Well, the interesting thing about this is a case almost exactly like it from Texas. The court ruled against this idea that you can have these sort of regulations, these restrictions on abortion clinics. And so a lot of folks are feeling, well, this is just a repeat of the Texas case. But there are some important differences. And what this does now is Justice Anthony Kennedy is gone, and he would usually side with the pro-abortion folks. So he's gone, and in his place, we've got Gorsuch and Kavanaugh. And people think, they don't know yet, but they think that they might take a more pro-life view on things. So this gives the court a chance to maybe go broader than this, than the one question. The Louisiana thing basically says doctors in abortion clinics have to have admitting privileges in a local hospital. But it could go way beyond that, because this court could say, well, what is the basis of Roe v. Wade? Why did we decide this? Maybe we want to go broader on this. But a lot of folks think all they'll do is just maybe say, hey, this is a repeat of the Texas case. Let it go.
Paul, in the minute that we have left, can you talk about some of the big cases that you'll be looking at regarding religious liberty?
Yeah, there is one from Montana. It's Espinoza versus Montana Department of Revenue. And basically there was a scholarship program that would let people donate and get a tax break to give scholarships to kids. And some were going to kids going to religious schools. And Montana said, we have this thing called the Blaine Amendment. No, you can't do that. And so when it went to court, the Montana Supreme Court ended up saying, we'll just drop all the scholarships. Nobody's going to get any. And so maybe this case is moot already because the situation is gone. But this basically goes to the very heart of, can you take government programs, can you take government benefits and say, everybody can have them but religious people? And this could have vast implications because things like 9/11 services, fire department services, what if a church calls you and says, we're on fire? Oops, sorry. Blaine Amendment says we can't come and rescue you. Yeah. So there are implications to this case if they side with Montana.
Yeah, very interesting. All right, Paul Strand covering the Supreme Court for CBN News. Thank you.
Sure, Paul. The judiciary under President Trump. How this administration has made it its goal to put conservative justice in place.
When I came to Regent University, it's like the world opened up. I felt like I needed to advance my career and go back to school. Regent was a perfect fit for me. The Regent professors are world class. You are equipped. The focus of the faculty is on each individual student, whether it's online or in person. You become a part of Regent's family. You carry with you not just the content and the knowledge, but the confidence to understand that we can be significant in the world.
Regent University. Follow your path.
Nigerian Christians
in Iran are routinely arrested.
Catholic Christians continue to suffer.
In times of trial and affliction, you need to know the truth.
One of the fastest growing Christian populations in the world.
Join Wendy Griffith and George Thomas for Christian World News.
Young people are the ones who are open to the gospel.
Powerful stories of suffering and hope that affect all Christians. Watch Christian World News, Saturday at 5 p.m.
Get Protect Your Sleep and discover how to improve the quality of your life. A free DVD or booklet from the Christian Broadcasting Network.
If you're not a great sleeper, you can do things to make yourself a great sleeper. If you're already a pretty good sleeper, you can enhance your sleep and be even better.
5 leading experts help remove the obstacles between you and restorative sleep.
When you don't get a restful night's sleep, you wake up with an accumulation of stress.
Call 1-800-700-7000 or go to CBN.com to get your free DVD or booklet today.
Everything you do better with a good night's sleep.
You'll discover how food affects your sleep, how to put insomnia to rest, explore effective remedies for sleep apnea, and much more in Protect Your Sleep. Wake up to your best life and get Protect Your Sleep today. Call 1-800-700-7000 or go to CBN.com to get your free DVD or booklet.
Well, President Trump campaigned on placing conservative judges in courts across the country, and in the lead up to the 2020 elections, he's touting his achievements in confirming judicial nominees. So far, the president has filled up a quarter of the federal appellate court bench and says he'll soon have filled more than 180 federal judicial roles.
And they will uphold our Constitution as written. These distinguished men and women are some of the most gifted scholars, respected jurists, and finest legal minds ever placed on the federal bench. Together, we're restoring American freedom, defending American justice, preserving the extraordinary vision of our founding fathers.
We recently spoke with Carrie Severino, the Judicial Crisis Network, about President Trump's judicial picks.
And she told us, though much attention has been placed on the justices the president has picked for the Supreme Court, most cases don't make it to be argued there.
Most people, we focus rightly on the Supreme Court, but people don't realize more than 99% of cases end at the appellate courts. They don't ever get to the Supreme Court. So there's a lot of cases that the Supreme Court just doesn't have the time to go back and correct. It's so important to have good judges there who are going to be faithful to the law, that aren't going to be applying one standard to, to policies they like and one standard to policies they don't like. That's the kind of judges Trump has put on the bench, and it's so great for this country to have them there in a life tenure position.
And Carrie, what are some of the big issues facing this country these judges could have a direct hand in?
Oh gosh, I mean, it's every issue that comes before the courts. Right now, the Supreme Court already is dealing with a lot of cases having to do with abortion, having to do with religious freedom, having to do with immigration and the limits on government. All of those come up regularly at the appellate courts as well. And again, we have to make sure those decisions are being made correctly in the first instance, because you can't just count on the Supreme Court to go back and fix your mistakes.
The confirmation battle has not been easy for a lot of these nominees. Carrie, what are some of the instances, what are some of the hurdles you've seen some of them run into?
Well, I think one of the things that's most interesting has been seeing some of the attacks on religion in the candidates. Amy Coney Barrett, of course, with the "Dogma lives loudly within you" moment, was a really impression with one. But there's also been attacks in the Knights of Columbus and membership in that group. Stephen Menashe, who's a Second Circuit nominee, has had some anti-Semitic attacks on some of his record of defending the state of Israel. So that's something that I think is a real concern we need to flag and keep an eye out for going forward, to make sure that this is not something that continues to be leveled against nominees who are some of the most outstanding men and women we have as lawyers today.
We've reported on Lawrence Van Dyke and the fierce opposition by the American Bar Association to his nomination. What do you make of that?
Yeah, I think he's another one that, some of those same issues, he's done work for groups like Alliance Defending Freedom, and that flags him as, oh, you must be someone who's going to now be unfair, for example, to LGBT litigants before him, which he said, they unfairly said that he wouldn't say he would be fair to all litigants. And he said, that's not true. I believe everyone is made in the image and likeness of God, and they need to be treated equally. It's very discouraging to see the way the ABA has had biased interviewers looking at that process, seem to be digging for excuses to find someone who is really one of the most qualified nominees you can imagine for the Ninth Circuit. He's been Solicitor General for 2 of the states. Not one of them would have been enough. 2 different states in the Ninth Circuit. And yet they called him unqualified for, I think, very blatantly political reasons in this case.
Do you think we'll see more situations like this with the ABA?
I think what we might see is the White House drawing back from the ABA altogether. I think this has really uncovered what has long been a problem of politicized evaluations of nominees, where there have been studies done. They have a tendency to evaluate more harshly women, minorities, and conservatives. And I think that's why Donald Trump has said he's not going to give them a privileged role in the process where they get nominees before they're even announced. That's what a lot of presidents had done before and said you get a first cut at evaluating them. The Trump White House has said, no, this group is actually a liberal special interest group, because the ABA's positions are kind of down the line liberal. But it's now gotten to a point where a lot of people are calling for nominees just not to talk to the ABA, or only to do so, with a recorded transcript of what they said, because they have no ability to defend themselves from mischaracterizations of their statements.
Carrie Severino, Judicial Crisis Network, thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
Thanks, Carrie.
The case of a memorial cross on public land in Maryland, and what its outcome means for the First Amendment.
Christians around the world are standing with the Israelis. But why? In CBN's free magazine, Friends of Israel, you'll discover why Christians are supporting the Jewish state, how Israel is fulfilling prophecy as a light to the nations, and ways you can pray for the people of Israel. Israel needs the support of friends like you. Call now or go to cbn.com to get your free copy of Friends of Israel.
Heavenly Father, we do thank you for the work of your Spirit, Lord God, with this movement of getting the Bible,
yes,
Lord, into public schools.
Watch The Prayer Link, Tuesday nights at 6:30.
Hey, if you're tired and exhausted all day, you can't think clearly, and you really just need a cup or even a pot of coffee to get through your day, then join me, Dr. Josh Axe, for this new series where I'm going to teach you how to transform your diet and use essential oils and supplements to get a better night's sleep.
Get Protect Your Sleep and live your best life with innovative information from 5 leading sleep experts.
If you're not a great sleeper, you can do things to make yourself a great sleeper. If you're already a pretty good sleeper, you can enhance your sleep and be even better.
Discover a sleep-enhancing bedtime routine, how to put insomnia to rest, learn how to relieve pain that disturbs sleep, and much more in Protect Your Sleep.
Everything you do better with a good night's sleep.
Wake up to your best life. Call 1-800-700-7000 to get your free DVD or booklet of Protect Your Sleep today.
Don't miss out on this brand new series.
The U.S. Supreme Court made a major decision about the use of religious symbols in the public on public land. It centers on the case of a memorial cross in Maryland.
Challengers claim the cross violates the First Amendment, but the court didn't agree. Abigail Robertson has more.
The Supreme Court issued a big win for religious liberty, ruling 7-2 that the Bladensburg Memorial can stand, a 40-foot cross honoring 49 men from the area lost in World War I.
The Supreme Court has sided with reality and sensibility.
The legal showdown started when the American Humanist Association challenged that the cross, sitting on public land, violated the separation of church and state.
When I heard they wanted to take it down, it struck at my heart. It was terrible.
The memorial is in the shape of a cross to mark most graves of the war's fallen across Europe.
There's going to be a presumptive constitutionality for these religious symbols and monuments and memorials and practices across our country. That's a sea change.
Kelly Shackelford, chief counsel for the First Liberty Institute, says the legal precedent in the case of the cross was flawed.
They said that everything's changing. This 50-year-old precedent, this Lemon case, where separation of church and state, and all these concepts that are not in the words of the Constitution were brought up, and that led to a lot of hostility by the government to religion. They said, and look, in these cases, Lemon is not going to be applied anymore.
At stake in the Peace Cross ruling was this dire scenario.
If this memorial is able to be destroyed, that means that bulldozer is going to turn from Bladensburg and roll across the river over to Arlington National Cemetery, where it'll start knocking down the Argonne Cross, the Canadian Cross of Sacrifice, and may even make its way down to Teddy and Bobby Kennedy's graves, which themselves have grave markers in the shape of a cross.
Shackelford claims the Lemon v. Kurtzman case of 1971 has been used to attack nativity scenes, veterans memorials, menorahs, and 10 Commandments monuments.
So what's happening now is we're going back to the Constitution, which is favorable to religious freedom.
Ruth Bader Ginsburg, one of 2 justices who dissented, argues when a cross is on public property, the government may be presumed to endorse its religious content.
The founders would be shocked by that idea. We are religious people with a religious heritage. There's a Moses holding the 10 Commandments in the Supreme Court.
First Liberty is also celebrating the High Court throwing out an Oregon court's ruling against their clients who refused to bake a cake for a same-sex wedding. Reporting from the Supreme Court, Abigail Robertson, CBN News.
All right, a lot to keep our eye on.
That's right.
Well, that's going to do it for Faith Nation.
Have a great night.